Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Week 15 hidden gems for the 2024 fantasy football season. Over the course of today's episode, I'm going to be talking about players at a variety of different positions, players that you may consider to be sleeper options going into Week 15, but I like to call them my hidden gems based on everyone's favorite cinematic universe. These are players that either first and foremost aren't rostered in very many leagues, or on the opposite side of the coin, aren't being started in very many leagues, which isn't a surprise. As we approach Week 15, the beginning of the fantasy football playoffs, we don't want to get cute with it. We want to start our studs. We want to play the players that got us into the fantasy playoffs, and I do not blame you. But for those of you who are in a bind, and with the injuries that your team has collected over the course of this season, if in fact these players are available in your league and they are suitable options for your starting roster, I truly do believe they can help you capture a victory in advance for the fantasy football playoffs going into Week 16 and beyond. Outside of that, again, if you guys are looking for my specific thoughts on an individual player, you could travel down to the description of the video. There are timestamps available there. Later tonight, I'll be live streaming here on the channel starting at 7 p.m., Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m., and Sunday morning, 7 a.m. That's all PST. So if you guys have any questions, be sure to swing on by. Thank you very much. Also, at the end of today's episode, we'll be putting together a couple entries via Underdog. If you guys want to check out the link, it's down in the description. If you head on over today and use code Andrew when you sign up and make a first-time deposit minimum of $10, not only will you be able to claim the first-time deposit offer and potentially tail the upcoming entries that we're going to share at the end of today's episode, but also get my rankings sent to you every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season. These rankings are by position, by tier, half PPR, full PPR, all-encompassing rankings, including flex. For those of you who are interested, check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility based on your current location. And if in fact you are not eligible, you can always find my rankings via Patreon, link also down in the description. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin by talking about Stone SMARTT, tight end of the Los Angeles Chargers. Again, at this current moment in time, he's either being rostered in 2% of Yahoo leagues or 3% of sleeper leagues. Again, this is a very deep sleeper going into this week, but again, someone that if in fact you are in a bind, could easily play as your starting tight end going into the upcoming matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, as we all know, the Soul Stone requires a sacrifice, and the sacrifice being Will Dissly, who has already been deemed out going into this week. We know that Ladd McConkey is questionable, but is expected to play going into this upcoming Sunday's matchup, and Justin Herbert has been cleared with his ankle injury, so all systems are go for the Los Angeles receiving threats, including Stone SMARTT, who should be the primary tight end receiving option going into this week. Now, the reason why you would ever potentially consider starting him in the fantasy playoffs is if you're in a situation in which you've lost David Njoku or Evan Ingram due to injury, and potentially you want to go ahead, pick this player up, and give him a shot, considering they're taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are allowing 15.53 fantasy points per game since Week 6 to opposing tight ends. That's the second best matchup at the position since Week 6. They've allowed over 100 receiving yards to opposing tight ends in 3 of the last 6 games. The following performances taking place: Atlanta, 5 catches, 104, and 2 touchdowns. Kansas City tight ends combining for 15 catches, 109. San Francisco tight ends, 57 and a touchdown. Carolina, 5 for 77. And of course, this most recent week in which we saw Brock Bowers do not very much, but Michael Mayer within that overall contribution, combining the duo with 10 receptions, 117 receiving yards. Again, this secondary cannot cover tight ends. We would anticipate that Stone SMARTT in this overall upcoming role should be exposed to a lot of opportunity, considering this is a Greg Roman offense. Greg Roman, their offensive coordinator, a former offensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. We know how much he wants to prioritize the tight end position. There's a reason why Will Dissly has got himself more exposure to opportunity over the course of the last 2 months, and he certainly delivered on that. Now that he is absent, Stone SMARTT will be asked to step up. Obviously, this most recent week when Will Dissly went down with his injury, of course, he did end up having himself a couple receptions and looked decent. So going into this week, considering the Chargers offense have given their tight ends this most recent week, again, 6 catches, 73 yards from Chargers tight ends back in Week 12, 5 catches for 54. If we're going to be in a situation in which Stone SMARTT is being exposed to 6+ opportunities in terms of targets, 5 receptions, 50 yards could be within the realm of possibility in a full PPR, a solid 10-point play for those of us who are in need of that going into this week. Even more potential for upside, especially considering they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All right, moving on to the next option I wanted to mention is Josh Downs, the thumbnail of today's episode. Again, we've talked about Josh Downs a lot over the course of this entire season. Aslay obviously has missed some time due to an injury and obviously coming off of the bye week. But going into this week, the reality of the situation is that, again, they're taking on the Denver Broncos secondary. And over the course of this entire season, many of us have been scared for our wide receivers taking on the secondary, considering how much talent they have. But the reality of the situation calls for Josh Downs as a playable option, primarily because, first and foremost, Riley Moss is out, and Jaquan McMillan, the primary nickel cornerback of the Denver Broncos, has mightily struggled in terms of slot coverage. Over the course of this season, he has given up the most targets, receptions, receiving yards, and yards after catch to opposing slot receiving options over the course of this entire season amongst all nickel cornerbacks. Therefore, if we're going to be in a situation in which Josh Downs, who plays 85% of his snaps from the slot, is going to be exposed to a healthy volume of opportunity, coming back from his injury, now healthy, ready to go, a full participation of practice for the entirety of the week, taking on a Denver Broncos secondary that is allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers since Week 6, 29.7. Obviously, we've most recently seen some ridiculous performances against Denver secondary. Jerry Jeudy, 235 and a touchdown. Elijah Moore within the slot position, 8 catches for 111. Jacoby Myers, 10 for 121. Trey Tucker in that same game, 7 for 82. Zay Flowers, 5 catches, 127 and 2 touchdowns. We have seen many of performances against the secondary as of late, which gives me confidence that Josh Downs, within the reality of the situation, can deliver. Over the course of the last 2 starts with Anthony Richardson as his starting quarterback, 20.2 and 16.9 fantasy points and a half PPR in those games, over 80 receiving yards in both and a receiving touchdown. If we're going to be in a situation in which Josh Downs is exposed to the opportunity share that we are anticipating, he should have himself a fantastic week. Currently only being started in 8% of Yahoo leagues, 17% of sleeper leagues. I understand the hesitation, but I really do believe he's a solid play going into this week at a top 36 wide receiver capacity. Moving on, let's talk about the Power Stone. As we always do, the Power Stone is a running back. And going into this week, a power back of sorts, we have Sincere McCormick, starting running back of the Las Vegas Raiders. And I want to preface starting running back primarily because earlier this week, we did hear in a press conference from the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, Antonio Pierce. He did specifically say, regardless of the status of Alexander Mattison going into the Monday night matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, he is expecting McCormick to be the starting running back of the offense. Considering how well McCormick has played over the course of the last 3 weeks, weeks 12 through 14, averaging 5.5 yards per carry and 3.66 yards after contact per attempt in these most recent matchups against Kansas City and Tampa Bay, which are no slouches to run-stop defense. They're great in those overall capacities. Again, Sincere McCormick still delivered. This most recent week against Tampa Bay, 15 attempts for 78 yards, 3 targets, 2 receptions, 11 receiving yards, and 9.9 fantasy points. They began the second half with a 10-minute drive in which 9 rushing attempts were delivered in the direction of Sincere McCormick. This offense and the coordinator continues to commit to the running game, and as long as that is going to be the case, taking on the Atlanta Falcons, a defense that again has given up 10.51 fantasy points per game on the ground since week 6, a 4.69 yard per carry average to opposing running backs over that span of time. We are anticipating a solid performance, especially considering in 2 of the last 3 games we have seen the following performances from backfields against the Atlanta Falcons run-stop defense. Denver combined for 96 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Minnesota this most recent week, 110 and a rushing touchdown. We would anticipate a running back like Sincere McCormick, who is currently only being started in 12% of Yahoo leagues, 15% of sleeper leagues, to be a solid option going into the upcoming week, considering the commitment to the running game and, of course, the head coach committing to him being the starting running back, regardless of Alexander Mattison's return. All right, moving on to the Space Stone for this week. The next hidden gem is ROMEO DOUBS. As we all know, the Space Stone is typically a wide receiver that is going to shoot for the moon and hopefully fall amongst the stars of the fantasy football universe and deliver a solid performance. And as we approach week 15, again, there's been a lot of conversations regarding the receiving core of the Green Bay Packers. Who is the number 1? Is there an established number 1? Considering this most recent week, 0 receptions out of Jaden Reed. And of course, Christian Watson delivering fantastic performances within the deep ball receiving game. But it's finally time for ROMEO DOUBS to kind of get back into this conversation, considering he's coming off of the concussion protocol. And I truly do believe in his return, he will return to being the number 1 receiving option, which he was prior to his injury. Going back to weeks 6 through 11, throughout that span of time, ROMEO DOUBS had the most snaps played, most routes ran, most targets, most receptions amongst all Green Bay wide receiver options, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Dontavion Wicks included. Therefore, once he returns to this lineup, taking on the Seattle Seahawks, which should be an exciting matchup and competitive one, assuming the weather does not impact the overall upside of this game, based on the most recent weather reports, at most it says 15% chance of coverage of rain. I expect that number to probably decrease by the time we get to Sunday's contest. Of course, the upcoming matchup against the Seahawks, they are the 16th best matchup, middle of the pack, but allowing 27 fantasy points per game since week 6 to opposing wide receivers in a half PPR scoring format based on receiving statistics isolated. We've most recently seen performances such as the following: Wilson, 2 catches, 57 and a touchdown. Of course, that's Michael Wilson last week. Devontae Adams, 5 catches, 66 and a touchdown. Jennings, 10 for 91 and a touchdown. Demarcus Robinson, Cooper Kupp in that most recent game against them that went to overtime. Incredible performances, both scoring, both going over 90 receiving yards. There is still potential for Romeo Doubs as the #1 receiving option on the outside to take on the secondary and deliver a fantastic performance for the Green Bay Packers and, of course, for Jordan Love. Again, he continued to lean in his direction in terms of total targets in those last 5 games in which Romeo Doubs was healthy and ready to go between week 6 through 11. I would anticipate, again, with Jaden Reed lacking opportunity and Christian Watson needing the deep ball, in between all of that, it is going to be the Romeo Doubs show, who should be able to show up and show out against the Seattle Seahawks this week. All right, let's move on to the time stone, which we have the Washington Commanders. It is not a singular player, but it is a team defense that I truly do believe that if somehow, some way they are still available in your league, you should be picking up and playing them. Now, I'm not playing them ahead of the Baltimore Ravens taking on the New York Giants. That should have been an automatic pickup and play. But as the week has progressed and we have seen Derek Carr's injury and we are trending in the direction of Jake Haener starting at quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, it truly does lead me to believe that the Washington Commanders is an automatic pickup and play, not only because the last 3 games in which we have seen the Saints with a backup quarterback this season between week 6 through 8, defenses against the Saints offense scored for fantasy purposes 12, 20, and 17 fantasy points in those 3 individual games. But additionally, Marshawn Lattimore, who is currently a member of the Washington Commanders, a former cornerback of the New Orleans Saints for his entire career, is suiting up and playing against his former team. Again, he is probably going to spill all the secrets of that defense. This is going to be a one-sided affair, in my opinion. I truly do believe that the Washington Commanders defense, that has not played entirely great as a fantasy option all season long, truly should be considered as one going into this upcoming matchup, considering the backup quarterback option and, of course, the fact that this defense for the Saints cannot stop the run or the pass. It should be a very early lead for Jaden Daniels in this offense, which will force Jake Haener to continue to have to throw the ball to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Cedric Wilson, Jawan Johnson. Again, not great options available to him. This should be an event in which he is turning over the ball multiple times and leading to even more fantasy upside. The final player in regards to our hidden gems is Aaron Rodgers. Look, Aaron Rodgers is a player that over the course of the last 8 games has scored over 15 fantasy points in 7 of those 8 games. He has been able to put up 2 passing touchdowns in 6 of the last 9 games and has been a top 18 fantasy quarterback for a 4-point per passing touchdown league in 8 of the last 13 games. He's been a solid option, but this week has a great opportunity of taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are the 8th best matchup based on quarterback passing statistics allowed, passing yardage and passing touchdowns, interceptions included, over the course of this season since week 6, allowing 16.17 within that category and allowing a 70% passing completion percentage. I understand that this most recent week, Will Levis was not able to take advantage of said matchup, but I truly do believe Aaron Rodgers and the boys will be suiting up in order to try to find their first victory in 5 weeks. This should be a situation with Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, of course, coming back with his 2nd consecutive game. Breece Hall expected to play this week. All their weapons at their disposal, taking on a team against Jacksonville. In Jacksonville, no weather concerns implied. This should be an opportunity for Aaron Rodgers to continue his streak of 200-plus passing yards, 2+ passing touchdowns, to be a solid quarterback play for those of you who are in desperate need of one, who again just want to get a solid 15 points. This is a set it and forget it kind of situation with Aaron Rodgers as this week's Mind Stone. Cursed with knowledge, I truly do believe he's going to have himself a fantastic performance, especially considering on the opposite side of this ball, the Jacksonville Jaguars, without Trevor Lawrence, now without Evan Ingram, again, they are beat up as an offense. They're going to be rarely moving the ball, and when they do, again, it may lead to turnovers, even maybe short field opportunities for Aaron Rodgers and this Jets offense. Okay, well, these are going to be my hidden gems for week 15. Again, approach cautiously. Start your studs first and foremost. But again, if they are available and push comes to shove and you are dealing with a lot of injuries, potentially these guys can deliver and hopefully capture a victory for you in week 15. All right, to close out today's episode, I want to go ahead and put together a couple entries via Underdog right now. Let's go ahead and share a couple of them that I put together just moments ago prior to the recording of this video. So let's go ahead and begin with AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and of course, DJ Moore. Off the top of my head, this entry is pretty much like the bounce back performance entry. AJ Brown, who's obviously coming off of a lackluster performance. Of course, we've heard it all week long. They want to get him the ball more. Very similar to Deebo Samuel last night. Expect a lot of opportunities in the direction of AJ Brown in order for him to deliver higher than 4.5 receptions. Amon-Ra St. Brown in the same boat. Obviously, this most recent week, very much so not implicated within the overall game plan. Taking on the Buffalo Bills in the shootout, should be able to surpass 4.5 receptions. And DJ Moore, of course, last time out against the Minnesota Vikings, a fantastic performance. Again, this most recent week, because he was dealing with injury, didn't see himself a lot of opportunity share, but neither did Cooper Kupp last night, of course, against San Francisco. But I think going into this week, based on their matchups, based on the opportunity share that they should be exposed to, should all be able to surpass these numbers. Moving on to the next play, we have Tyrone Tracy and Alvin Kamara going higher on their receptions. Again, Tommy DeVito is the starting quarterback of the New York Giants. Tommy DeVito over the course of his entire career has been averaging 7 targets per game to his running backs when he has been the starter. Expects for a lot of exposure to opportunity in that regard for Tyrone Tracy in a negative game script, who's coming off of a game in which he had 10 targets, 5 catches. Alvin Kamara surpassing 3.5 receptions should be a cakewalk, primarily because, again, they're going to be in a negative game script taking on the Washington Commanders. And when Jake Haener needs to dump it off because really there's no other receiving options open, Alvin Kamara will be the main benefactor of those circumstances and situations. Moving on to the last overall entry I wanted to suggest, we have Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins, and Devon Achane all in the same game in an expected shootout to all go higher on their reception counts. Again, Nico Collins, over the course of the season has fluctuated, but as the clear number one of this offense, and considering how much CJ Stroud has quite frankly ignored the overall usage of Tank Dell over the course of the last couple weeks, we should continue to see Nico Collins get himself 6+ receptions. 4.5 is just the easy answer. Tyreek Hill obviously coming off of his most receptions of the season this most recent week. What was it? 14 targets, 10 catches, over 100 yards and a touchdown. I would assume taking on the second easiest matchup at the wide receiver position against the Houston Texans secondary, he should be able to get himself 5 receptions. And of course, Devon Achane, he has surpassed this number in 8 of the last 9 games with Tua Tagovailoa under center. Should once again be a cakewalk, especially considering Devon Achane is only averaging less than 3 yards per carry. I think it's 2.89 yards per carry on average over the course of the last 3 weeks, which continues to trend the offense in the direction of getting him involved within the screen game, lining him up out wide within the slot position, or just as a check down option on a consistent basis. All right, that's going to cover it in regards to some of the entries. Again, we'll go ahead and put together more entries later tonight via our live stream starting at 7 p.m. PST, or of course via the live streams this upcoming Saturday and Sunday morning. Again, if you guys are interested, be sure to swing on by. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, but outside of that, that'll cover it in regards to our Week 15 Hidden Gems. Thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.